Um, I want to welcome everybody, and I'm going to go ahead and put my self on spotlight. Tonight we're having a rendezvous. It's the old times. They used to get all the fur trappers and stuff together, and they'd build a big campfire, and they would gather around it and swap tales and do all sorts of other things. And that's kind of what us Northwesterners are doing now. We're get a number of our guilds together. We've got one representative from each of our guilds to come and tell a story for us. They're also going to share a little bit about what's going on with their guilds, um, just so we kind of keep up a little bit. A number of us have been in mostly online, but some of the groups have kind of gone back to live storytelling, and I'm sure they'll share a little bit about that as they go. Um, I do want to pass on the request from the tellers that you not chat during the storytelling. Don't use the chat. It kind of distracts from people and the stories they're telling. Um, also, mute yourself so that we don't pick up any extraneous noises, as sometimes happens. We can't always control the dogs barking and other things like
My
that.
phone.
But unfortunately, the lightning isn't cracking around here tonight like it did 2 nights ago. So anyway, Ann Brendler is assisting me as a co-host, and she's going to be kind of trying to get people in the door and so forth. We got about 50 in our session tonight already. We could probably have another 20 or 30 easily. So they may be popping in as we go. But we're going to start out with probably one person who is um, certainly well known to most of us. She's actually a member of three of our guilds. Um, she was started out basically, I think, with the Seattle's group.
Hmm.
Um, she went to a concert with her daughter to Laura Sims, and Laura Sims did this concert, and she was just impressed with storytelling, and handed her a still damp purple mimeographed sheet with a list of upcoming events, and that got her started. And boy, I tell you, Pat is just a marvelous member of our various organizations. She's told stories of all sorts. The first time I heard her tell a story was up in Bellingham when they had that national conference,
Oh,
and she told the story of her mother, the pirate. And she's come many times to our guild programs and told stories. She's also probably the best MC in the entire Northwest. Um, Other people stand kind of in awe of her, and she actually left. I don't know if you know Larry Home, who tells those really scary stories. She spooked him out one time even. Um, Pat's going to open up for us with a tale. She's also going to. She's basically representing not the Seattle group, but she's also lives in Port Angeles, right?
mhm.
And so she's a member of the Story People of Clallam County and also the South County Story Guild, but she's representing the Clallam County Story People tonight. Pat, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Barry. It is so lovely to see all of you. And my only wish is that we could really all be just sitting right next to each other, which we are, electronically. I know many of you have come up to Port Angeles to the Forest Storytelling Festival over the years, and that time of year was a highlight. It was a lot of work to get ready, but it was like having a wonderful family reunion in my home, and I didn't have to clean the bathroom. I mean, it was just terrific. And all of you who came and you'd catch up, and there was never enough time. There was never enough time for talking about the tellers that we heard and for all the things we've been doing in our lives. And I miss that terribly, but I am very grateful for the opportunity to come together however we can. Now, I have a little bit to pass on about the Story People of Clallam County is the name of our group, and we have a in-person storytelling swamp. Sometimes it is swap with a featured teller once a month from September through June. And some of you online here have come up and told for us. And that has always been wonderful to get tellers from out of area. You know, we all know each other's stories. You know how it is. It's lovely to have an infusion of tellers. We meet at the library. This year, we managed to bring in two nationally known tellers to do a concert and a workshop. Kim Whitecamp and Colin Irwin, a wonderful Irish teller, came. And June 12th, mark your calendar. That is our Liars Contest. Now, and if there's a contest, it seems, of course, fitting that there would be a prize. Well, the first prize is $100, second, $50, and the third, $25. And our own Toby Anderson there was won it last year, and she took home, in addition to the $100, the most magnificent trophy that I'm sure if you contacted her, she would be happy to display to you. It was very, very unique, one of a kind. Excuse me while I move the cat over. Okay. So if you want to, and Ingrid Nixon is going to be running the Liars Contest, and she's also going to be giving a workshop afterwards, and there'll be more about that. If you go to our Facebook page, you can get more information. And I think that's about what I have for the notes. And so, papers. Well, the story, I kept thinking, what should I tell? But Barry said I could tell, it would be my choice. He did kind of like Northwest, but, it could still be my choice. And so I chose a little something from The Devil's Storybook by Natalie Babbitt, because given times that we are in, sometimes I believe the devil might be afoot. There was once a very pretty lady who lived all alone. Now, the truth of it was, she didn't have to live alone. She was so pretty, there were many young men who wanted to marry her. They hung around her home where they played guitars and tried looking in her window, and they were just so sad but hopeful. Now, the very pretty lady didn't want to marry any of them. She said, "It's no use being loved for how I look. I want someone to love me for who I am. I will never marry anyone unless I find someone who can love me for being me." Now, that was a very wise statement, but no one is wise all the time. And the truth of it is, the very pretty lady liked looking in the mirror. And in fact, she would sometimes spend quite a bit of time looking in the mirror. And she would look at herself and look at herself, and she would be pleased. And afterwards, she would go out and talk to some of the young men, and they would even become more hopeful. And when she went to market, they would come along and carry back her packages for her. And all she wanted was to love someone for who she was. After a while, one way or another, the devil heard about the very pretty lady, and he decided it was just the thing he needed to brighten up hell. And so he packed up a great big bag of disguises and went up to have a look at her. Now, he'd heard how pretty she was, but no one had told him that she never let anyone in her house. And so he got out his disguises. And first he appeared at her door as a preacher. She wouldn't let him in. And then he went as a beggar man, and she wouldn't let him in. And he even went as a king, and she wasn't having any of it. So he decided he would disguise himself as one of her suitors and hang around and wait for market day. And when market day came, there he was. He walked right next to her all the way to town, looking at her all the time. And he carried back the heaviest package. And when she had gone inside the cottage, his mind was made up. She was exactly what he needed in hell, and he was going to have her. Now, when night came and all the sad and hopeful young men had left, the devil threw off his disguise and whisked himself into the lady's chamber with a puff of red smoke and a clap of thunder. And when she woke up and saw him, she shrieked. And he said, oh, my dear, don't be afraid. It's just me, and I've come to take you back to hell with me. Never, she said, never. I shan't go, and there's no way you can make me. Oh, aren't you clever? That's very true, my dear. There's no way I can make you go back to hell before your time, but you'll like it there. You'll be the prettiest thing that there is, and you'll brighten up the place. I'm already that right here, she said, and for all the good it does me, and why should I go to someplace else and I wouldn't gain anything? Oh, he said, but in hell, your beauty will last forever, and here it will only fade. And for the first time, the very pretty lady was tempted, and the devil knew it. He took a mirror and held it in front of her face and said, now, wouldn't it be a shame for all that beauty, that pretty face, to go to waste? If you stay here, it'll only last 15, maybe 20 years. But in hell, you will always be beautiful until the stars fall from the sky and a new order is made. And we both know that will never happen. And the very pretty lady looked at herself in the mirror, and as she sometimes did, that it was rather nice to be pretty. But in the nick of time, she asked, tell me, is there love in hell? Love, said the devil. Oh, who would want that? Oh, well then, she said, I am not going, and you can beg all you want and whine and everything else, but it won't do you any good. And then the devil grew very angry, and his eyes glowed like red embers, and he said, is that your final word? Yes, she said, it is my final word. Very well, said the devil. I can't take you against your will. That's true. But I can take your beauty. I can, and I will. And he did, and he took it, and with a puff of smoke, he was gone back to hell, taking all the pretty lady's beauty with him. And when he got there, he took it and tacked it up all around his throne room, where it sparkled and twinkled and really did brighten up the place. After a few years, the devil wondered about that lady. And so one day he took himself back up to earth, and he went to her cottage. And it was about twilight, about this time of night, and he looked in through the window, and there he saw her sitting at a table with candles, and she wasn't alone. Now, the first thing he noticed, that she was ugly as a boot, but not alone. And sitting across from her was a man, just as ugly as she was. And between them, in a cradle, a very ugly baby. But the devil took a breath and he stepped back because there was so much love in that room that it almost overpowered him. And he said, I will never understand this in a million years. And he went right back to hell, and he tore down all the pretty lady's beauty, and he wadded it up and threw it up into the dark sky, where it formed itself into a new star. So if you're out on a night when it's clear and you look up and you see a star that seems especially bright that maybe you hadn't noticed before, it might just be that beauty and that love. Thank you.
Wow. Pat, that's a great story. Unfortunately, out here in the Northwest, a lot of times we look up and all we see is clouds. But next time we get a clear night, I'm going to take a look. Thank you, Pat, and thank you for letting us know a little bit about what's coming up. I did send out an email, which those of you who registered late haven't gotten yet, but included a couple of attachments, one about our storytellers tonight, but the others about the various guilds and some of the things that are happening, and connections to their websites are there too. So I will send that out to everybody that came in late, because I'm sure you would like to have that information as well. Our next teller is a friend from up north in Vancouver, and Philomena has actually been down here quite a bit because we used to do these epic storytelling programs, and she participated in a number of those. Um, we had a great time at the Nordic thing, and I think she did you did the Kalevala too for sure. And
Yes.
but actually, the truth is that all those epics got started up there
Yes.
because the Vancouver group did them for about 20 some years before they basically ran out of steam up there, and we picked it up for a while, but then COVID came along and we
Yeah.
haven't been able to get things up since then. We were working on the Mabinogion, but it didn't quite go. But
No.
Philomena represents the Vancouver, not the island, but the city storytellers, Vancouver tellers. And I'll let her tell a little bit about what's going on there. I think she wants to tell her story first, though.
No, I might.
Go
I
ahead, either
might.
way.
I might get the housekeeping stuff over first. Yeah. So we're up here in Vancouver, and we've been under different titles and names. We've been around for over 40 years, which is quite amazing. Yeah. So we celebrated our 40th storytelling anniversary. Woo! Yeah, 1 year ago, 2 years ago now. Yeah, we're around for a while. There's a history of our storytelling group on our website at vancouvertellers.com. Maybe Russell, who's here, who's one of the members of the team, he can put it on the chat later. And yeah, so we went on to Zoom during the pandemic, and then we came back to in person. But people, it was great that we connected with people in the States and people on the island. So we decided we'd go back and do both. We didn't want to do hybrid, but we do in person from October to May, and we meet once a month, and we have three main tellers, and then we have a circle. And in the circle, you can share a little story or a poem or a song for 3 or 4 minutes. And sometimes all sorts of interesting storytellers come out of that. We also offer classes if anybody wants to learn how to do some storytelling. And then we have the Zoom nights, Usually 4 to 5 a year. We usually do October, November, and then we take a break in December and do January, February, and usually March or April. And coming up on Sunday, we have our March Zoom night on March 30th, and we will be having Anne, who's our co-host tonight, and Mary Desson, telling on Zoom with us on from 7 to 9 with the Vancouver Tellers. And if you want to be part of that, you can, if you send us an email at vancouvertellers@gmail.com, you can get the link for Sunday. We usually put out the link on the Saturday before the performance. So please join us, and then we'll have one more in April, and then we wrap up our in-person ones in May. So yeah. So we keep busy. We keep busy up here. So that's a little bit of a taste of what we do. So I have so my story. Oh, that was a lot of talking all of a sudden there. Uh, so I decided that I'm going to do a little story and a poem for you tonight. And I mainly do Irish stories. So the first one, I call it The Legend of Cong, and Cong is a beautiful village in the west of Ireland, close to where I grew up in the west of Ireland, and there's a beautiful lake there called Lough Cong. And so the story is very old. It was collected in the 1800s, many years ago. Yeah, so it's great that somebody collected it and wrote it down so that we can have these stories to tell. Yeah. So I'm going to start with just a little Gaelic chorus of a song to open the story. Yeah. Ver mi ora valo, ver mi ora vani, ver mi ora ta me dronas to me. Now up above the lake of Lough Cong, there was a castle. And in that castle lived a beautiful young woman. And she was to be married to a king's son. But a few days before the wedding, the young man, he was drowned in the lake. Well, the young woman was beside herself with grief. And some say she just pined away after him. But others say that the fairies came and took her away to a better place. But she was never seen in those parts again. Now, sometime later, a white trout appeared in the lake. And the people wondered about this, for a white trout had never been seen before or since. And it was there for many years, going back to the memory of the oldest person in the village. But the people began to believe that it was a magical trout that was in it, and no hurt nor harm ever came to it. But then an army of soldiers came to the village, and they set up camp there. And when they heard about the white trout and what the people believed, they laughed, and they made fun of the people for their superstitious beliefs. And one man in particular, he said that he would catch that trout and cook it up for his dinner. And that very next day, he went down to the lake, and the trout, knowing no fear, took the bait and was caught. And soon that man had the trout in his frying pan on his fire. And when he thought that it was cooked on one side, he flipped it over. But there was no sign of cooking on the fish. Well, that's strange, he said, but I'll flip it again by and by. But when he came back to turn it again, there was still no sign of cooking on the fish. "Well, bad luck to me, but that is a very strange fish indeed," he said. "But cunning as you are," he said, "I'll have you yet." And he flipped the fish over a few more times. But there was still no sign of the fire on the fish. "Well," he said, "maybe you taste better than you look." And he picked up a fork and a knife. And he put the knife right into the trout. And as soon as he did, a murdering cry rose up from that frying pan. And the trout leaped right out of the frying pan onto the floor. And where it landed, up rose the most beautiful woman that he had ever laid eyes on. She was dressed all in white, and she had a gold band around her head, and blood pouring out of one of her arms. "Look," she said, "look where you cut me, you villain, you." Well, he couldn't believe his eyes. Why couldn't you have left me comfortable in the water where you snared me, and me on duty?" she said. Well, he shook like a leaf, and he begged for forgiveness, and he said, I didn't know that you were on duty." "I was on duty," she said. "I was waiting for my true love that's coming to me through the water. And if he comes while I am away and I miss him, I will turn you into a pinkeen, and I will chase you up and down the rivers of Ireland forevermore." Well, the man, he thought he'd lose his life at the thought of being turned into a pinkeen, the tiniest of fish, and he begged for mercy. "Then you must become a changed man," she said, "or you will regret it. You must talk to the people, and you must respect their beliefs. Now take me back and put me back where you found me." "Oh, how could I drown such a beautiful woman?" he said. But before he could say another word, the woman was gone, and there was the trout lying on the floor. He ran and he got a clean plate, and he slipped her gently onto it, and he ran as fast as he could in case her lover came before he got her back in the lake. And he slipped her gently into the water. At first the water turned red until the stream washed the blood away. And to this day there's a red mark on the trout's side where it was cut. Well, the man did change his ways, and he did become a better man, and he began to respect and understand the people's beliefs. And I'll tell you now, he never, ever ate fish, ever again. In the course of time, he left the army, and he moved up into the mountains, and he became a hermit. And they say that he prayed every day for the soul of the white trout. And that is my story of the legend of Kong. Good. Thank you. Now, the poet William Butler Yeats, he wrote lots of poetry. A lot of it was inspired by his unrequited love for a woman by the name of Maud Gonne. She refused to marry him several times, and she told him that the people of Ireland would thank her one day for not marrying him because he'd be able to get a lot of poetry from all his grief, which is true. So this poem is a famous one called the Song of Wandering Aengus. And of course, Aengus is the god of love. And it is a love poem. But I was wondering, after I had worked on this story, wondering when I went back to that poem, if maybe he had read that story and it inspired a little bit of his poem. And it goes like this. I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand, and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing, and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream, and I caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor, and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossoms in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone, and kiss her lips and take her hands, and walk among long dappled grass, and pluck till time and times are done the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philomena. Beautiful story. The poem went right along with it. And I especially love that Irish lilt. For those of you who don't know, she was born in Ireland and has retained a lot of that beauty of speech and also brought along a lot of their stories and myths and other legends as well, which she shares rather regularly up there in Vancouver. Thank you very much, Philomena. Appreciate that story. I'm trying to find the button. There it is. Okay. Our next teller is a fisherman, among other things. He's traveled the world in the Air Force. I don't know if he's from this area originally, but after many years of traveling around, they decided that he needed to settle in the best place in the world, down in Olympia, Washington. He does a lot of outdoor stuff, camping, fishing, that sort of thing. And I'm sure that he's very careful about the salmon, the trout he catches. He caught one of those beautiful women. I think he'd be shocked. But anyway, Jerry represents the South Sound storytellers, and they have quite a bit going on down there in the South Sound. One thing they do is they have collaborated with the story people of Clallam County, and one Wednesday a month they have an online story swap. And you need to go to their website and get the email address to email for the link to join them, but you're certainly welcome to come and hear their stories. Also, some of you probably don't know, but one of our storytellers tonight is sick. Rebecca Hom has no voice because of respiratory ailment, so she's not going to be with us. But she will be telling stories in both Clallam County and South Sound in April. The first Wednesday, the second, she's going to be in the story in Port Angeles, and then the 9th, she's going to be down in the South Sound telling stories about the Women's Auxiliary Service pilots, the WASPs, 3 of which were from this area, and we hope she recovers and she can bring those stories. But for right now, Jerry's going to tell us a story, and maybe he'll tell us a little bit more about the South Sound Guild as he does.
Alrighty, thank you. Hi, my name is Jerry Bundell, and I'm a member of the South Sound Story Guild, and thanks for having me this evening. Hey, a couple things about the South Sound Story Guild. Just wanted to get, and Barry, you covered a number of them for us, is we meet every the second Wednesday of every month and have our story swap. And our format at our meetings is we begin with we have an opening teller and a featured teller, and sometimes we deviate from that a little bit if someone has a special program that they want to present. So we've always got 2 really good stories to start the evening off, and then folks can offer up stories and tell stories for the remaining time that we have. But that happens again on the second Wednesday of every month. There's a few months that we don't meet. Usually November and either July or August, because we have other events going on during that time. But you can join us on Zoom. We meet live down on the waterfront in this beautiful little building that that we rent from the city of Olympia, and we're in view of the Capitol. As you know, the South Sound Story Guild is at the very south end of the Puget Sound, right there and we're in the state capitol in Olympia. But the two big events that the South Sound Story Guild puts on are Celebration, and that happens in November, and it's the weekend after Thanksgiving. We get together and tell stories and invite the public in, and we always have a really good attendance for that, and we look forward to that event every year. The other event we have coming up that we run in the summertime, either in July or August, is an event called Stories in the Park, Stories in the Dark. And we have a space down in Squaxin Park, a beautiful outdoor setting. And we start the event before sunrise, and that's when we tell like kind of our normal stories, if you will, to get the crowd going. And then once the sun sets and it gets nice and dark, then we tell our spooky stories. It's always a great deal of fun, and it's open to the community, and always an enjoyable event. And we've always been really fortunate that we've had beautiful weather for that. So if that fits in, please have that put that on your calendar, and you can find the dates on our website. So tellers of all skill levels are welcome in our club, and of course listeners are encouraged. And it's a good group of people, and we're very supportive of each other, and have a good time together, and a lot of good friendships come out of that club. But anyway, the story I'm going to tell tonight is a creation story, and it comes from a Native American tradition. I was thinking, well, we've got spring and summer coming, and there's this very delightful creature that seems to show up around spring and summer. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about story about how this creature came to be. And the story comes from like I said, the Native American tradition. It comes from a tribe down in southern Arizona, and their tribal lands spill over into Mexico, the Tohono Oho Hadan tribe. I hope I'm saying that right, but this is a story that's credited to them. Well, the creator was sitting on the porch one day and kind of admiring. He was quite admiring his work. He was really happy. He saw that young children were out playing, the boys and girls and the puppies, and looking at that and enjoying the warm sunshine, and thought, oh, life is so good. Look at all the happiness around us. Then he started thinking and started going to kind of a dark place in his mind, and said, one of these days, all of these people, they're going to be old and gray and bent. Their knees will be creaky, and their hands will be all gnarly from all the hard work that they had. And, there's going to be, a little less joy in their life. And he thought and thought, and the more he thought, the more depressed he became. Then he realized, I'm the creator. I can do something about this. So he came up with a plan, came up with an idea in his mind, and he grabbed himself a hopsack bag and started out to work on his creation. The first thing he did is he wanted to gather up a bunch of colors. So he thought, well, everybody likes the golden rays of the sunshine. So he reached up and grabbed some of that gold out of those golden rays and put it in his bag to start his colors. Then he walked a little further down the path, and he noticed some of the young women were grinding white corn, and the white in the flour was very attractive. And he thought, oh, what a wonderful color to add to my collection and to my creation. And he asked the young ladies if he could have some. And they said, oh, indeed, creator. And he flirted with them a little bit, and they giggled and laughed. And so he reaches down and gets a handful of white corn, puts that in his bag. But while he was doing this, the color of their hair caught his eye, this beautiful blue-black hair. And he said, this blue-black would be perfect with my creation. Might I have just a little bit? And of course, the women obliged him, and they cut a lock of their blue-black hair and put that in the bag for them. And as he was looking at the sky, he thought, I really love the colors of the evening night sky. So the sky turns from the bright, soft blues and turns slowly and slowly to darker and darker colors. And my favorite color is the indigo color that happens just around sunset. So he reaches up, grabs some of that indigo color, and puts that in his bag. Then he walks. He walks through the forest looking for more colors to add, and he comes upon this meadow. And it happened to be the time of year when the wildflowers were in full bloom. And he thought, aha, I've found just the right place to gather all these colors. And he was so delighted. He went, he picked up some periwinkle and some orange colored flowers and some beautiful green flowers. And he was just filling his bag with all these delightful colors. As he got towards the end, he thought, I'm definitely going to need some green in here. So he grabbed some of the pinyon pine needles and added those to his collection. He shook that bag and he was quite content with where he was headed with his creation. And as he started walking back to the village and leaving, he started thinking that there's something missing here. And he thought for a while. He was very quiet and thinking. Then he heard the songs from the birds. Thought, that's what they need. My creation's going to need some songs. So he reaches up and he snatches all the songs out of the air, takes them away from the birds, puts them in his bag, shakes them up, and said, now I'm ready. My creation is ready to go. He makes his way back to the village. He gathers up all the people around him and says, come, I have a new gift to offer to you that'll bring us happiness throughout all the years of our lives. And he gives the bag to one of the children and he tells the child to open the bag. And when he opens the bag, out comes all these beautiful colored butterflies, all in different sizes and shapes. Some are orange, some are white, some are blue, and all sorts of different combinations of colors and sizes. And everyone was so delighted. They were smiling and laughing, and the children were dancing around. And just about the time the last butterfly came out, they all started singing, and that added to their delight. But when the songs broke out, the birds heard this and thought, there's a problem here. The birds came from every place out of the woods. The first one came to the Creator and gathered around him, very angry. The first one to speak up was the oriole. He said, Creator, you made me with this nice color. You gave me this beautiful voice, and you promised it would be mine and mine alone. Why would you do this to me? And then the little sparrow, the little gray and brown sparrow, said, Creator, you gave me these dull colors, and you gave those butterflies, all these bright, beautiful colors, those scaly creatures, you gave them my wonderful voice. How dare you? That was the only thing that I had that was of any value, that was of any beauty. How could you do that to me? And the blue jay chimed in, the mockingbird, all the birds came. They were angry, and the Creator thought, oh my goodness, I've made just such a big blunder here. What an awful mistake. And as this cacophony was going on, the birds started fighting amongst each other. They were shrieking and clawing, pawing at the ground. And the Creator finally said, stop, everyone stop. And he snapped his fingers, and just like that, he took the voices back from the butterflies, gave them to the birds, and the birds discovered they had their voices back. They were quite happy, so they went on their way. But the butterflies, they were still out there with their beautiful colors. The people were still quite content with these butterflies. The Creator stood back and said, all is good now. So that, my friends, is how and why butterflies are beautiful but have no voices. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. That's a great story. Um, and I think I will appreciate the butterflies all the more once they finally start winging around. It shouldn't be too much longer, though. Thank you very much for telling us about what South Sound's up to, and I'm sure that some people might be interested in joining you. The Harbor House is where they meet in Olympia. Information about that is in that email that I will be sending out. You can also find it on their website. Our next teller is from Vancouver Island. Now, you got to realize that oftentimes we down here in south of the border forget that there's two Vancouvers, and we get them mixed up all the time. And in fact, I got told, don't get confused here now. Vancouver and Vancouver Island are not to be confused. And they actually have 3 or 4 different storytelling groups on Vancouver Island, one of which is the Round Town Tellers in Nanaimo. Margaret is from that group, and she's going to share a little bit about what Around Town does. They have a really nice website. Information about that you'll be getting. But I'll let her go on and either tell her story first or share a little bit about the group. I will say this, though. She specializes in women's stories, and especially historic and legendary stories. And she's going to be telling us about a historic Canadian woman tonight.
That's right. Oh, that's so great. Thank you, Barry, for that. And so pleased to be here with all of you. And Barry and Anne, thanks for all this work that you've done in gathering, and Pat, too, your treasurer. And all of you who've come from Vancouver Island, the mainland in BC, and all the friends in the United States. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And we are a busy group. Vancouver Island has several groups, and the Around Town Tellers in mid-island, mid-Vancouver Island, right in the center in Nanaimo, which is a Snuneymuxw name for gathering place. How appropriate is that? And we meet on the second Fridays of every month at the Unitarian Hall. And we have 2 more gatherings. So there'll be one on the 14th of, the 11th of April with this delightful theme called Scallywags and Scoundrels. And, it's so fun because our tellers, we celebrate, like some of you've mentioned, seasoned tellers and brand new tellers. And our joy is to introduce 2 new tellers, brand new tellers, at the April 11th event. And they were part of the annual storytelling workshop that takes place. And then we have one more session and in May. So we'll end up with May 9th, On the Road Again, stories of travel and adventure and all kinds of delightful tales. And basically, our season is from October through May, and we are both hybrid. So you can join us on Zoom, dear friends, across Canada and the US. We'd love to have you come and join us at the aroundtowntellers.com, aroundtowntellers.com. Check us out and you'll see the links there. We also are out and about in the community, which is lovely. So some of us are sharing at seniors' residences and also going out to festivals. And we are participating in the Storytelling of Canada. The Storytellers of Canada meet and every year, and this year it's in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So that's something to look forward to in July. Dear friends, I'm honored to share with you one of my heroines is Pauline Johnson. And over 20 years ago, I had a great joy, with permission from the Mohawk people and the blessing from their group, to share her story. And tonight I present the shorter version of it to give you a little of the fire and the grace that is Pauline Johnson. It was a blustery cold January night, and the year was 1892. The venue was the new Academy of Music, downtown Toronto. Pauline Johnson, Miss Pauline, was waiting in the wings, waiting to go on. She was the 7th speaker that night. She had been invited by her friend Frank Ye. He stood in the wings with her, saying, "The creme de la creme are here, Pauline. Go out and do me proud." And then he introduced her, a new voice in our midst, Miss Pauline Johnson. Pauline's heart beating like a drum. She knew exactly what she would do. She came out and stood center stage, and she waited. She waited in the silence. She waited till all the whisperings and the nudges and the gasps. A woman on stage? And is she an Indian? She waited. And then she began in her deep, melodious voice. She opened with her nature poems. And she cleverly knew how she would close her presentation. She chose Cry from an Indian Wife. And it ends with these words: Go forth, nor bend to greed at white man's hands. By birth, by right, we Indians own these lands. Though starved, crushed, plundered, our nations lie low, perhaps the white man's God has willed it so. The words hung in the hall. No one said a word. She thought she had given great offense, so she quickly bowed. She had the grace, the presence to do that, was about to walk off stage. The entire room, as one, up and applauding madly, wildly. She came back and deeply bowed, looked at Frank Ye in the wings, who was ecstatic. You have saved my evening, he said. It was a beginning. It was a beginning, but it was hardly a beginning for Miss Pauline. She had been writing her poems, her songs, she called them, my songs. And she'd been reciting them, her stories. She'd been reciting them since she was 7 years old at her family home, Chiefswood, on the banks of the Grand River, just outside of Brantford in Ontario. Her father, the hereditary Mohawk chief, George Johnson, had taught her the stories, had taught her about who she was and is, and who her people are. And her beautiful English mother, Emily Howells, taught her all about stories and words and books. And for the rest of her days, Miss Pauline Johnson wrapped herself in those two beautiful traditions for the rest of time, whether she was on stage or not. She was such a hit that evening in Toronto that Frank Ye was asked by countless people, can we have her speak? Can she come and entertain us? 125 recitals were booked over the next year. This was the 1890s. Pauline went alone and celebrated her songs. She was on fire. But Frank Ye cautioned her and said, you'll be moving beyond the borders of one province. Pauline, you will need a male partner. It's just going to be better for you. Traveling everywhere, going into hotels, restaurants, alone? Yes, she said, fine. And they searched high and low and found Owen Smiley from the music hall background. And Owen and Pauline celebrated their stories, their songs, and their Canadian lives right across the country, from Nova Scotia to out here on Vancouver Island and through the northern United States. And you know, everywhere she went, she made a promise to herself. I am going to squirrel away just a little bit of that money. And there wasn't a lot. But she wanted to realize her other dream, and that was to get her poems published. And only in London, England. Of course, her mother's birthplace, but that was the dream. And in 1894, Miss Pauline Johnson, on her own once again, went across to London, England, in her pocket, clutching these letters of recommendation from no less than the Governor General of Canada and several premiers of the provinces. She had gained quite a reputation by then. The letters worked wonders. She was welcomed in London like a star. She would dress in buckskin, have her hair long, and celebrate all her songs. They called her the Mohawk Princess. But she knew she had to return. Before she did, she met with a publisher, and after some interesting giving and taking, he agreed to publish her songs. But Pauline came back, and she toured the country again with Owen, who finally said, "Pauline, my first love is the musical theater. I need to get back on the stage, the music halls." And of course, she released him. But she was alone again. And for the next few years, life was challenging, touring and organizing and traveling and booking all these events. And her health began to suffer. She had always had a bit of respiratory problems. And now she was struggling financially. Do you know, Pauline said, "I don't have one piece of jewelry left. I've pawned it all." But as in life, as in stories, fate has a way of stepping in, does it not? And fate took the form of a young man. Walter McRae knocked at her door. Now, Pauline knew Walter. She had worked with him very briefly. And Walter said, "Pauline, Miss Pauline, I have a proposal for you." "Oh, it's not romantic," he said. It's professional. I would love to work with you, and I will take on all the business side. I will take care of everything." And Pauline sat and listened. And she knew that family and friends would say, "He's a young upstart. He's riding on the coattails of the star." But she listened to her heart, and Pauline said yes to Walter McRae. One of the best friendships of her life. And dear Walter was mindful of Pauline's health, and he gauged how much and how far and how wide they could travel, to such an extent that by 1904, she was so healthy again that they took on the Caribou Trail in British Columbia. 500 miles, she said, all the way up the Caribou. And every time we stopped to change the horses, I'd put on a show. In one town, they had 18 saloons. 18 saloons, one town, and not a place for me to present. So I walked into that saloon and I asked the manager, "Can we not make something happen?" "Well, what have you in mind?" And Pauline looked at him and said, "Have you any Hudson Bay blankets?" "Yes, ma'am, I do." And they spread the blankets on that billiard table, and up went Pauline and delivered one of her best shows. She writes that she was never more alive. She laughed like a child, slept like a baby, and ate like a lumberjack. And so they continued to tour. But she knew that this fatigue was more than just from the traveling. She was in pain. And by 1909, Pauline looked at her beloved Walter and said, "You know, Walter." And he said, "I do indeed." And she retired to the city of Vancouver in British Columbia. She called Vancouver the smile of God. "I will live in no other place." And Pauline retired to Vancouver, where she started to breathe again, where she was able to write, and she was able to visit with her beloved friend, Chief Joe Capilano from the Capilano community in northern Vancouver. And together they would paddle and sit and sip tea, and he honored her with their stories and said, "You may write them and publish them." And they became the legends of Vancouver. Pauline's health did decline, and by March 1913, she was hospitalized. And on March 7th, 3 days short of her 52nd birthday, Pauline Johnson died of breast cancer. She asked to be buried in beautiful Stanley Park. No other public figure that we know of is buried there. And although Pauline is gone, oh, her spirit, that fire, that light, it lives on. And dear friends, I am thrilled to be here tonight to share with you all some of that light. And I wish you well until we meet again. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Margaret.
It's a
Margaret
pleasure.
actually has another program coming up soon. She's going to be talking about Hildegard. You want to tell us a little bit about that
Oh, that's
presentation?
kind. I have the honor of sharing these women's stories, Barry, and the next one is in West Vancouver, so on the North Shore of Vancouver. I've been invited to share with the Vancouver storytelling group, Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century mystic. So I'm going over with beautiful musician and singer Leah Hokinson, and that'll be on Sunday afternoon, April 6th. If you're in the Vancouver area, I would love to see you there. And it's over at the Silk Purse in West Vancouver. And you can get in touch with me, StoryShare at shaw.ca, if you want more info. Thank you for that, Barry.
You're welcome. Okay. Our next teller is Juliana Person. Now, we've been talking a lot about people up in Canada. We don't want to forget about the people down in Oregon. You know, that state down to the south of us, here in Washington State. There are a lot of great tellers down there. Um, Portland Storytelling Guild has been around here almost as long as the Seattle Storytellers Guild has, and they have oftentimes shared their tellers back and forth at the point where I could practically not tell for sure who's what. Um, One group of tellers they have has got something coming up in just a week or so. The Crones are doing their thing. A couple of them are here with us tonight. Now, Juliana is not one of the Crones. I bet she's glad to hear that. She's going to be telling a story, though, and sharing a little bit about the Portland Guild for us. And so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm with the Portland Storytellers Guild, and we have every month from September to May or June, depending on the year a little bit, live performances at a lovely little venue called Artichoke Community Music. The next one coming up, oh,
Juliana, are you okay? There, are you
is
on
that all right?
frozen now?
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry
go
about
ahead.
that. Yeah, as I said, the live shows at Artichoke Community Music on the second Saturday of the month. So the next one is April 12th, and that is the Crohn's show, Dancing with Death. We also have on the third Sunday of the month, story swaps on Zoom. And on the third Saturday of the month, we have what we call Guild Extras, where we highlight one of our professional tellers to do a show on Zoom. You can find out all about it at our website, portlandstorytellers.org. So I am going to tell you guys a personal story. I think one of the best things about living in the Pacific Northwest is that we have so many opportunities for outdoor adventures. Within an easy drive of my house, I've got the coast and mountains to climb, forests to hike in, and rivers to kayak. A few years ago, my then boyfriend, now husband, and I got whitewater kayaks, and we were super excited to test them out. It just so happens that the Yamhill River went right past where I lived. I found a post online describing a trip from one town over that was mostly calm water with just a few little Class 1 rapids. Perfect for a first test of new boats, and it was only going to take 3 hours. So, on a Sunday afternoon, we set out. We followed the slow, lazy flow, weaving in between tiny islands topped with tufts of grass. We passed farms and woods, and we saw some wildlife. ducks and egrets and heron and a doe and fawn. It was fantastic. The planned 3 hours came and went, and we hadn't reached our ending point. We'd been dawdling a little bit, so we weren't too worried. We were looking for a boat ramp in a park that was just down the block from my house. And it's going to be impossible to miss because we would pass underneath a bridge right before we got there. At around hour 4, we got to a bridge, but it wasn't the bridge by my house. We weren't sure exactly where we were, but we knew that my bridge must be just a little bit further on. We picked up the pace a bit because the sun was starting to get low. But as we went around the next bend and the next, we still hadn't reached where we were looking. And the sun got lower, and the sky started to change color, and it got darker and darker and darker. We weren't where we were meant to be, but it's not a good idea to kayak in the dark. We had to just get out anywhere we could. But the thing was, there didn't seem to be any place that we could get out. The banks on either side of the river were really steep and really high. After a bit further, we found an area where the banks leveled out and we could get out of the water, but it was just woods as far as the eye could see on either side. If we got out, then what? Wander off and get lost in the woods? That would make a bad situation even worse. There was really nothing to do but just continue on, because surely where we were going was just around the next bend. It was a beautiful night, and if this evening paddle had been planned, it would have been great. It was quiet. The only sounds we could hear were the owls hooting and the soft lapping noises as our kayaks cut through the water. We didn't have any lights with us, rookie move, but the moon glinting on the water turned the river into a silvery sort of road that we could follow. Just stroke, stroke, stroke into the night. But as we continued on around bend after bend, the trees loomed in closer, and that silvery road was cast in shadow, and it got really, really hard to see. After several hours, we heard the sound of fast-moving water. Uh-oh. The prospect of running rapids in the dark was terrifying, but we knew that there was nothing above a class 1 on this river, so we should be okay. We focused on keeping our hips nice and loose so that we'd be able to handle whatever the water did for us, and we smoothly went over a tiny little wave. That was not nearly as bad as we expected. When a little while later we heard fast-moving water again, we had more confidence about it. Still tried to look ahead as much as we could, but all I could see was darkness. Darkness, darkness, darkness. Fallen tree right in front of me, smack. Before I even really knew what was happening, my boat had flipped over. Julian's boat flipped over. It turned out that we hadn't been hearing rapids at all. What we had been hearing was the sound of water rushing through the branches of this fallen tree. In the whitewater community, we call that a strainer. And Julian and I had been strained like spaghetti. We were now both in the water, with one hand holding our kayak and the other holding on to this fallen tree that stretched most of the way across the river. We just kind of perched there in the branches for a little while. It was about 2 a.m. at this point. Pitch dark. We were cold and hungry and exhausted, and we had no way to contact anybody for help, and there was definitely no chance of anyone happening by. What were we gonna do? We ended up taking turns getting ourselves and our kayak onto the downstream side of this fallen tree. We swam our kayaks to the shore, tipped all the water out of them, and assessed our situation. We were free from the tree. We had both our boats, and we were both uninjured. Awesome. On the other hand, though, we had lost the last of our water and one of my shoes, and most importantly, we had lost Julian's paddle. We were literally up a creek without a paddle. We thought about just spending the night right there on the bank, but it was pretty darn cold, and we weren't sure if our wetsuits would provide enough insulation. In the end, we decided we really had to keep moving. I gave Julian my paddle, held on to the handle at the back of his boat, and had him tow me. It was extremely slow going, and we were extremely tired. So tired, we started hallucinating. We kept seeing phantom lights and phantom bridges. At one point, I could have sworn I saw a tree covered in Santa hats. It was wild. At long last, just as we were starting to see hints of light at the edge of the sky, we saw a boat ramp and a dirt road and a street light. It still wasn't the park by my house, but it was somewhere. Civilization. We hauled our boats out of that water, up the hill, and stashed them in some bushes. And we started walking. We had no idea where we were. We surely must have passed the place we'd meant to go, and we could be anywhere on the Yamhill River by now. We tried to flag down some cars, but no one stopped. Eventually, though, we saw a house with a light on, and a garage door open, and a man working on something inside. I walked up the driveway out of the gloom, still wearing all of my kayaking gear. Helmet, full-body wetsuit. My spray skirt was slapping against my knees with each lopsided step, because I still only had one shoe. "Excuse me? Where am I? What town is this?" The guy looked at me like I was nuts, which was a very fair thought, but he answered our questions, and it turned out that we were in my town, and only a couple miles from my house. Amazing. I considered asking this guy if he might be able to give us a ride, but I was getting very distinct, "Please get away from me, you weirdo" vibes, so we kept on walking. By the time we reached my house, the sun was fully up, and I was already late for work. The first order of business was to call in. "Hi, yeah, I just spent the entire night stranded on a river, and I'm not going to be able to make it in. Sorry about that. Tell you about it later. Bye." After getting warmed up in dry clothes and absolutely devouring some food, we went to retrieve our kayaks from what turned out to be someone's front hedge, took an extremely needed nap, and then got online to try to figure out what in the world had gone wrong. As it turned out, I had misread the directions. The route wasn't supposed to take us to the park by my house at all. "Hey, Julian, remember that first bridge we passed? Yeah, it turns out that was where we were supposed to get out. That would have been 2 miles. We went 32 miles. Oops, my bad." Many people's partners might be angry hearing this, or at least annoyed, frustrated, but not my Julian. In fact, throughout this entire experience, it never occurred to either one of us to get at all annoyed with the other, which is one of the reasons why we ended up married in the end. And Julian was already starting to see the positives. Well, we did learn some valuable lessons about what not to do in the future. Oh, and hey, this might make a good story for you to tell. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good story. All right. I especially love that expression, strained like spaghetti. And I think you've inspired me not to try kayaking. Thank you very much, Juliana. Um, we want to move on to our next teller, and it is going to be Brad. As soon as there you are. Brad Grinford is Grinrod. Is that how you pronounce it?
Grindrod,
He's
yeah.
member of the Fireside Storytellers League, basically Tacoma, though they have done a few programs in Puyallup. Uh, they brought in a couple of really special storytellers, and for telling stories in Puyallup, but they meet, I guess, in Tacoma. And he has been involved with them for about 6 years. Uh, Serves as vice president. He started out as a Toastmaster, but nowadays he spends most of his time telling stories either to the elderly or occasionally to children. But he is retired after all, so he has time for those sort of things. He's going to share a story for us tonight after he tells us a little bit about the Fireside Storyteller Guild and what they're up to.
Well, Barry, actually, we're from Tacoma, but we meet in Puyallup. We've kind of found a home at the Puyallup Library, the city library in Puyallup. And so we meet there on the second Saturday and Saturday afternoon of every month. We're a pretty small group, and we're rather informal in our meetings, not structured. I'm amazed at the structure that a lot of these other groups have in their meetings with swaps and all of the other things, programs that they have. Well, we do a few programs out in the community every once in a while. I do some myself particularly. But I said we are an informal group and a small group, which has kind of worked out in a very interesting way in our favor. Since we meet at the library in the afternoon, we've attracted a kind of a regular audience from little children and their parents all the way up to older adults. So these days we start out with children's stories, and that can go on for a few minutes. And once they get bored and leave, then we can go on with the adult stories after that. We've done a very good job of boring these children and getting on with the other things. I hope I don't bore you here tonight. This next story is a short story, and it's one I learned from an old friend of mine, which was told to him when he was a boy by his grandfather in Iran, where he grew up, which is a true story. It actually took place and is reminiscent of the way life lessons about good behavior and such were taught to kids back then. Not unlike, I'm sure, the types of stories that you were told by your grandparents back in the day when you were growing up. It's called In the Old Days, and goes like this. In the old days, in the Middle Eastern country of Iran, where my friend grew up and where he originally heard this story, they didn't have a lot of the modern conveniences like we do today, such as, for instance, indoor plumbing, which turned a lot of what we regard as regular, mundane household tasks into a rather dreaded undertaking. Not that the bath itself was undertaking. So that regular household tasks, such as taking a bath, like I said, but not that such a bath was such dreaded. It was pleasant enough, but rather it was the extensive preparations required before you could even think about dipping your toe in the water that was the source of the consternation. For instance, first you had to round up a bevy of buckets in order to haul your bath water up from an outside well that stood, a good 100 yards or 100 feet or more from your house. Then you had to fire up the old wood-burning stove that you'd spent the last year and a half cutting and stacking and putting away wood for. And then once you got your water good and hot, You had to pull it off the stove and haul it over to your tub before straight away getting some more water going in order to replenish your bath water once it cooled off, which made taking a bath, as I said, in the old days, a rather labor-intensive and just kind of a dreaded chore. So in order to alleviate a bit of the tedium and make life a little more pleasant in the old country in the old days, in every downtown and every village, they had what were known as public baths, which were set up and run very much like a restaurant. You had your own private booth with a tub, and a server would come around and pour hot water in your tub for you, to supply you with a cake of soap and a washcloth and a towel. And then every few minutes, the server would come back around and replenish your hot water for you. And then when you were done with your bath on the way back out, it was customary to leave the server a tip. When one day, an old man, toothless and grizzled, wearing dirty, tattered clothes and smelling to high heaven, wandered into one of these bathhouses and wanted to take a bath. And as soon as he came in, the servers took one look at him in his tattered clothes and grizzled, toothless face and thought, oh my goodness, why, this old beggar isn't going to leave us much of a tip. In fact, by the looks of him, we'll be lucky if he even pays for his bath at all. So even though the servers clearly saw him, they knew he was standing there, nonetheless, they simply ignored him and no one stopped to offer him a bath. Now, in the old days, it was illegal to discriminate against the poor. The basic public services, the law dictated that basic public services, which the bathhouses had then become, must be afforded to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. And the old man knew this. So after being passed over by several more well-heeled patrons that came in behind him, well, the old man, he began to raise a fuss until finally one of the servers, in order to shut him up and to keep themselves out of trouble with the authorities, well, he stuck him in a decrepit, grungy old booth at the far end of the bathhouse that hadn't been cleaned in months, poured in a bucket or two of barely warm water, tossed in an old flaky cake of soap that was otherwise bound for the trash, a threadbare towel, dry himself off with when he was done, then left him there to fend for himself while he wandered off and to replenish the bath, the hot water for his more well-heeled patrons. Now, as I said, in the old days, it was customary to leave the server a tip on your way out. And at each one of these booths, there was a little silver box with a lid on it that was placed conspicuously on a counter next to the tub, specifically for this purpose. So when the old man finished his bath, well, he left a tip in this silver tip box as well. And when his server finally got around to cleaning up his booth and opened up the tip box, he was astonished to find that the old man had left him a $50 tip, which was considered quite generous at the time. In fact, it was easily 10 times the amount that the more well-heeled patrons would normally leave, which, as you can imagine, caused quite a stir amongst the other servers. $50, they quipped. Why, can you believe it? Well, they all said, we'll be keeping an eye out for that old man should he ever come back. When his fate would have it, a week or two later, he did. And as soon as he walked in, grizzled face, tattered clothes, as smelly as ever. Well, of course, the servers recognized him at once and fell all over themselves to be the first one there to accommodate him. Can I show you to our finest booth, sir? One of the servers offered. We just got in a new supply of towels, sir. Another one crowded in. Can I get one of them two of them for you? While the third one even went so far as to offer to buy him a new set of clothes to put on once he'd finished his bath. So the old man, he finished his bath and put on his new set of clothes, dropped a tip in the tip box on his way out as he did before. And no sooner had the door closed behind him than his server, who'd been keeping an eagle eye out, immediately rushed into his booth and opened up the tip box to see how much he left him this time. And when he looked inside, he couldn't believe his eyes. as this time the old man had left him $1. One measly dollar, which of course infuriated him. So he ran outside after the old man, followed by the other servers. And when they caught up with him, they demanded to know why he'd played such a dirty trick on them. "Hey, old man," they yelled, "what's up with this? When you came in the first time, sure, we could have treated you better, yet you left a $50 tip. But this time, when we treated you like royalty, you only left $1. But how can you justify that?" To which the old man responded, "Boys, boys, boys, the gratuity you left is perfectly justified. You see, the $50 tip that I left you on my first visit, which, as you mentioned, which you said you could have treated me better, it was actually meant for this visit. Because I figured, due to your greed on that first visit, that would motivate you to treat me with the respect that, in fact, all men truly deserve. And the $1 I left you today was in fact meant for my first visit, as just reward for your self-dealing and your self-serving. So you see, in the end, all things being equal, you have indeed been treated fairly. Thus your complaint is without merit." And that's in the old days.
Thank you very much, Brad. That's a great story. One I don't think I have ever heard, actually.
No, you haven't.
Yeah.
It's one I'm still working on. So it was a little bit rough, but it's coming along.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for sharing that story and actually letting me know exactly what's going on. I've always been wondering, the fireside storytellers of Tacoma, but yet their stuff's Puyallup.
Well, actually, it's not Tacoma anymore. We've changed the name just by the Fireside Storytellers League.
Ah, okay. I'll remember that now, and I put things out for you guys.
It's gone through many iterations. I think the club started way back in 1952, I think. So we've been around for a number of years. That's the year I was born, and I'm only 47 now, something like that. But at any rate, I'm just kidding. It's the Fireside Storytellers League. We're based in Tacoma. We meet in Puyallup, so everything is just absolutely confused, and that's just the way I like it.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, let's see. There we go. Well, that's our storytellers for tonight. Rebecca Hom was going to tell for us. She is living in Walla Walla, Washington, which is over on the eastern side of the state. And unfortunately, she came down with a respiratory illness and just couldn't tell tonight. But she did want me to be sure and let you know about the Blue Mountain Storytellers. The Blue Mountain Storytellers are meeting on a monthly basis in the Walla Walla Public Library. And you know how all storytelling groups start out with a group of people getting together and telling stories. So she wanted me to encourage you to be aware of it, and also to, if you just happen to find yourself in Walla Walla, in the beautiful Palouse region of the state, at the time when they're having one of their meetings, to consider joining them. Of course, she gets around quite a bit, and I mentioned already that she's going to be telling stories in Port Angeles and then also with the South Sound people. I want to thank everybody that has come tonight. And I do want to say to all you people who registered so late, I had about 80 people registered this morning when I sent out the reminder. And since then, I've had another 20 people, most of whom are here tonight, have registered since then. What you missed out on was a follow-up email I sent with 2 handouts. One is information about our tellers, including their email addresses and some other information, and their pictures. And also a second email that lists information about the various guilds that are represented with clickable links that you can go visit their websites. So I will be sending those things to you who didn't get them already following our thing. I'm also recording this, and I will have a link for the recording made available sometime early next week, and I will send out the link to everybody as well. So if you want to rehear one of these stories, and or if you want to contact these tellers, the information is going to be coming your way. I do encourage you now to switch back to gallery view, and I will turn off my spotlight. Give them a big hand.
Thanks so much.
Yay!
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Great audience, yeah.
Just
Yeah,
a
this was
beautiful
so
audience.
fun.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to remove the spotlight so they can see you.
Thanks, Barry, for putting this all together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
thank
much
you.
appreciate
Well,
it.
it's my pleasure, and I do hope that we can do this again next year.
Excellent.
This is our second annual rendezvous, and last year's was great. This year's was just as great, and I do hope that we will see you frequently in the coming months as we have our various programs from our various guilds and so on online. Also in person, there's quite a few things happening. Feel free to chat a little bit. I'm not going to force you to rush off, though I know a lot of you are probably ready to go, but I'll leave it open for a little bit.
Thank you, Barry. I was just going to say, I mean, I'm in Canada, North Van, but every time I come into the Seattle group, I'm always just, Allison just shows up and she's just present. So it's so beautiful to have that, you know,
We
because
remember her very fondly.
Yes.
Very fondly. She was quite a teller, quite a force.
Really.
we did so much together up here in Canada as well. And so she really was a great cross-border teller.
Yes, she really was.
Yes.
And I just want to send, you know, all our love from Canada to all of you there in the States, because it can't be easy going through these days and weeks and months and what looks to be a long haul.
Thank you for understanding, Abigail. It is difficult. It is challenging. It's not what any of us want.
Of course, it's understandable. And people in the arts, you know, we see all that and want to do something about it, and sometimes our hands are tied and we see the most atrocious things. So,
Yeah. What's given
And a
me
place to put us up for the next 4 years.
some bounce in the last couple days is thinking about the song from Les Mis, the song of angry men. That just really powers me up.
Wow.
Hope some of you are familiar with that song.
Well, I could just be thankful we have Zoom. I mean,
Yes.
it kept
Yes,
us together
that's true.
during the pandemic. We
Yes.
couldn't cross the border, but we could chat and tell
Yeah.
stories.
Mhm.
And even now, with all the craziness going on, we can still chat and tell stories and feel the oneness that we
Yes.
have.
We need them now more than ever, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Stories are a great path forward. We're so grateful. I mean, yeah, all the events, Zoom or in person, people are so happy just to be together in the most simplest and most beautiful and powerful of ways and listen to a story, right? It's what we're going to have. I often think after the apocalypse, we're going to have stories and music.
We will.
It's a bit dark, I guess.
Thank you to all the tellers this evening. You all just did a wonderful job. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
second that. And on that note, I'm going to say good night. Thank you all for coming and being here, and all the listeners and all the wonderful tellers and stories. It was a fantastic evening. Thank you so much.
I second the motion from Eva. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks,
I'll
everyone.
see you,
See some of you later this
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you.
And everybody,
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you for coming.
thanks for having
Good
us.
night.
Be well. Stay
Bye,
well.
Judith.
Thank you for telling. Thank you.